What's up, Bucs Squad? I'm your host, Jaron. I'm going to tell you why the offense might have been a little better than you thought.
What's up, Buck Squad? Marcus Ray. And I'm going to give you two very surprising picks for my offense and defensive MVP.
I'm James Yarcho, and I'm going to tell you why the Bucs are going to be searching for a new offensive coordinator.
Hey, Tampa Bay, it's the Buccaneers squad. Everything Tampa Bay Buccaneers every week. Breaking down all the big hits and game-changing plays from the heart of the Sunshine State, the way only the Locked On Podcast Network can. With a touch of the Buccaneer way, the Buccaneer Squad Show starts now.
All right, Bucs Squad, real quick. Today's episode is sponsored by Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Like I said, I'm your host, Jaron. We've got a kind of a season wrap show for you today. We're going to grade the offense, grade the defense, give an offensive and defensive MVP before we go around the NFL to look at some of the games of this past weekend. On Wednesday, we'll kind of dive more into the playoffs, but today we'll kind of wrap up the games that just took place because there was a crazy Sunday night game. I don't know if you all got to watch that one, but that one was a lot of fun between the Steelers and the Ravens. But let's start with the offense. Overall, if I'm going to give it a C+, just because they did have the good stretch earlier in the year. Obviously, we're not as good at the end of the year. Had a lot of injuries offensively, but the offensive line continues to be a problem. The running game continues to be a problem. Baker looked really good early, kind of struggled later. Emeka was great early, then he struggled later. Overall, I think it's a C+ right in that range for me.
Go ahead, James.
Go ahead, Marcus.
Well, I'm going to give it a C-. And, they only averaged 23 points a game. And I just think that they played better football when everybody was injured or they didn't have their complete roster of players and weapons. I mean, they actually were able to score some points against some good teams. Even, when they lost to Philadelphia, I believe, when Philadelphia was still kind of relatively good or expected to be good. But you go out to Seattle, you put 38 points up and everybody gets excited. Then the next week, put 30 points up on a San Francisco team. I just think everything kind of turned left after the Detroit game. I think something about that game just took the wind out of their sails. But even though they went into the break 6-2, we had high expectations. And obviously, you can't run the ball as effectively if Bucky only plays 10 games. And then Baker played hurt. You had problems up front. Then you started seeing penalties. And then you started to see turnovers. I mean, they were a much different team when they turned it over versus when they did not turn the football over. I still was never impressed with them not being able to go vertical when they needed to. And it's not always play action. I mean, sometimes it's just my guy's better than your guy. And we saw teams come out there and go vertical against this defense. So it's not something that's impossible to do, and it's called taking your shots. But I would just go C- because I think they did the least with the most as far as the talent that they really possess and they have. But football is a team game. So when your line's not completely healthy and you have moving parts and your quarterback gets banged up, trying to get your running back out there and then get receivers healthy, then you just won't be who you're supposed to be. So to finish up 8-9, I thought was unacceptable because they played better football when most of their guys were injured.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I'm in like the C- D+ range. And look, I'm sure we'll talk more about Josh Grizzard in a little bit. I already see one of the comments talking about OC has to go. Look, this was an offense last year that was among the elite of the elite. And I understand you have a change in a play caller because Liam Cohen, again, snuck off in the middle of the night, much like the Baltimore Colts moving to Indianapolis. But the whole reason that you promoted Josh Grizzard was to keep that continuity, was to keep that same system. That was the entire plan. And Grizz had to deal with a lot of problems. You had the shuffling of the offensive line, all the injuries there. You were losing Mike Evans and Chris Godwin and Jalen McMillan and Bucky Irving, all for extended periods of time. Baker was playing through injury. Marcus, as you just mentioned, those are all valid reasons. But the best offensive coordinators figure out how to adjust when you're missing pieces. They figure out how to get the job done. And my biggest gripe with Grizzard has been the situational play calling. The scripted plays to open the games, they've been great. They march down the field, get a touchdown time and time and time again. It's been the chess match where Josh Grizzard has really struggled to get this offense going. And when you take a look at the drop-off that they had, you added more talent to that offensive side. You added Emeka Egbuka, who looked like a runaway offensive rookie of the year before the bye week. You added Tez Johnson. You added those people, and you dropped 7.1 points per game from last year to this year. You go from 29.5 to 22.4 when you have a guy that was running the same system. I mean, you take a look at the offense as a whole. The way they finished the season, they were top 10 in two categories: third down conversion rate, which is wild because it seemed like they could never convert those to save their lives, and time of possession. That's where you were top 10 this year. You were 25th in yards per play, 26th in yards per rush, 27th in fourth down conversions, 19th in goal to go efficiency. You were, 20th in pass yards per game. Like, this offense took a monumental step backwards when they should have been even more dangerous than they were last year. And Marcus, you nailed it. They played worse as they got healthier. And that was the other frustrating part about what we were seeing with Josh Grizzard, was when he had his full allotment of weapons, it seemed like he didn't know how to utilize them all. I understand that week 18 was a nasty, rainy, disgusting game, but you have Mike Evans out there getting the fewest targets that he's gotten like ever. You have Emeka Egbuka still not getting the ball. You have Chris Godwin not getting the ball. Your shining star was Cade Otton. And all due respect to Cade Otton, he's a solid tight end. But the fact that you can't figure out how to get these guys involved tells me that it was not a job that you were prepared for. Maybe Grizz is going to be a great offensive coordinator one day. He's going to be a great play caller one day, and this experience is going to help him in that. But he was not the right guy for this job, and it showed week in and week out.
And I think the biggest concern for the offense, and I brought it up a few times, especially after games, I really don't think they had an identity all season long. There would be games that they're like, hey, we're going to run it 40 times. And there'd be games like, oh, we're going to throw it 40 times. Whereas you would play other teams, especially the better teams, and you knew that they knew exactly what they were offensively, and they were going to play to their strengths. And I just never felt like Tampa did that. They let too many things dictate what they were going to do during a game. And that's one thing that we always hear about the college offenses is when you run a college type offense, the defense can dictate what they want the offense to run. And so when you play the better defenses, they'll dictate you into something that they know that they can stop. And so that's kind of what I felt like at times this year, that they kind of played almost a college type offense and had no idea what kind of offense they wanted to be this season. And it was just kind of week in, week out dependent. And so I think that's something that, and I will say part of that might be because of the young coordinator, but that's something they got to figure out next year, what they are offensively.
Well, and the other thing is, I don't think Tampa Bay scared anybody. Like, once they were on film and you watched them play and they didn't have all their guys, they still found a way to kind of score and win. That's because Emeka and Baker had a really solid rhythm going on. And defensively, they played just well enough to win. And I'm talking about the first, the first 8 games. But it was like, statistically, when you only average 205 yards a game passing with a quarterback like Baker, you're only averaging 114 rushing, and you're only putting up 23 points a game, and you're banged up, no one's going to fear that. And I think what a lot of teams figured out was if you kept the game close enough, you would beat the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, or they would find a way to not finish. Ironically, by me saying that, they scored 16 points against the Panthers, find a way to win. They only scored 20 against Arizona. Those were their last 2 wins. And even going all the way back to New Orleans, they scored 23 points and obviously had to score on defense. So offensively, I mean, they really just couldn't get it going. And that's a good point about having an identity, Jaron, because like when you play someone like Chicago, you know they're going to run the football, or you know Denver's physical on defense, right? Or, you know, so when you play certain teams, you know kind of what to expect, and you have to figure out how to deal with it. And to your part, James, like to your point, when you can't figure out what to do with what you have, then that's when your inexperience is going to be way out front. And I think Grizz, you know, probably bit off more than he could chew. And just because you come from a guy's system doesn't mean you always can duplicate his success, because you guys don't think alike. It's just the same playbook. I mean, some guys may say, hey, we want Cade Otton to, you know, let's get him off first, or hey, let's only use Mike here, or let's use Tez on motions, or we'll line up Chris here so we can get a matchup on a safety that we like. I mean, you have to really get in your bag as a play caller, because the other thing, and I know we'll get into this in the next segment, but their defense really struggled a lot too. So when Tampa found themselves, let's say, in a track meet, like early in the season, like with Seattle, I mean, that worked in their favor. The only problem is they couldn't run that race with Buffalo. They couldn't run that race with New England, and they found a way to not show up, and they just got obliterated by the Rams. I think that 3-game stretch, after the Detroit situation happened, I think coming out of the break, those first 3 games, I just don't think they were built to come out of that mentally tough enough. They had to win at least one of those games. And if they win one of those games, or if they don't lose to the Saints or Atlanta, it's a different conversation that we're having as far as the playoffs. But that offense, I think, was anemic at best since the break.
Yeah, and again, you can talk about, you know, reasons that they struggled. You know, it is a legitimate reason that your quarterback was playing injured. An injured Baker still gave you a better chance than a healthy Teddy. You know, it is a legitimate reason that you were having to shuffle around the offensive line. I think they finished the season with 9 different offensive line combinations through 17 games. Those are all legit. You lost your top 2 receivers, your number 1 running back. You lost your wide receiver 3 to a broken neck. You know, all those things are legitimate. But when you see them trending down after getting those guys back, that's where the frustration all really sets in. And Jaron, I agree with you wholeheartedly that they didn't really have an identity. And you go back to some of those games, Marcus, you mentioned the Seattle game. At that point in the season, the offense was still performing at a level high enough that it masked the deficiencies of the defense. Then the offense started struggling, and the defense picked them up. You go back to that Saints game right after the loss to Detroit. It's like, okay, you just got Mike back, and then you lose him again. You're struggling there. The defense picked him up. And we're going to get into the defense in a minute, but it's like the defense should have been the one to keep you in these games. You didn't deal with the same injuries. You didn't deal with the same problems. You should have had a better unit on that side. Whereas last season, you had an offense that was so electric and you assumed you were going to score every time you touched the ball that it masked the deficiencies of the defense. It was a dumpster fire, and it really stinks considering the expectations, the hopes for this team, especially even halfway through the season. They were still talked about as a Super Bowl contender, and now we're talking about them missing the playoffs for the first time since 2019.
And I thought this year they were way too Baker-centric. And I didn't mean like they just put all the offense on him, but I mean it more as in as soon as his play dipped, the offense was just not anywhere close to what they were earlier in the season. Earlier in the season, and this is why we maybe should have seen this coming, he was playing at an MVP level, and they were eking out games, just barely. And so as soon as he stopped playing at that MVP level, that's when the offense did not look good at all. And so it was way too – and that's what I meant by earlier when I said they need to get a running game, is because it was way too reliant on Baker has to play at an MVP level for us to do anything offensively. And that's just not realistic, because I've said this before and I've said it on here. Baker is a very good franchise quarterback. You can win with him, but he's not a guy like a Patrick Mahomes or a Josh Allen where he's going to go carry you places and carry teams on his back. He's a guy that if you have the pieces around him, he can win for you. And this year, I felt like they operated too much like he was a Mahomes, a Josh Allen, those top-tier guys. But I coming up next, the not-so-fun part. We get to grade the defense. You'll want to hear that coming up next. Well, this episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. The new year doesn't require a new you, maybe just a less burden you. We all carry things that weigh us down or hold us back, and therapy can help you identify what those things are by offering an unbiased perspective to better understand your relationships, motivations, and emotions. That's where BetterHelp comes in, making it easy to get matched online with a qualified therapist who can help you work through what's holding you back. Maybe it's fear, pressure, perfection, or doubt that's been weighing you down. All BetterHelp therapists are fully licensed in the U.S. and work according to a strict code of conduct. They do the matching work for you. A short questionnaire identifies your needs and preferences. And with over 12 years of experience, they typically get it right the first time. BetterHelp makes it easy to get matched online with a qualified therapist. Sign up and get 10% off at BetterHelp.com/lockedon. That's better, HELP.com/locked-on. And our next one up is Prize Picks. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Whether you're starting a new routine or jumping into player reprojections for the first time, trying something new can feel like a challenge. But with Prize Picks, it always feels good to be right with high-pressure football matchups every weekend and elite hoops action almost every night. The action never slows down, and Prize Picks lets you stay in control. Prize Picks is the daily fantasy app that makes watching sports even more exciting by letting you build lineups based on player projections. No drafts, no waiting, just pick more or less and play your way. Getting started on Prize Picks was quick and simple. The app is super easy to navigate. It's made watching games more engaging, especially when following individual player performances. I love the flexibility with options like Flex Play, where you can still get paid even if one pick misses. The new early payouts feature is a game changer. If a player starts hot, you can cash out before the game ends. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. It's good to be right. All right, we're back here with another segment of the Bucs Squad Show. Just want to let you guys know, if you didn't get to join us Saturday, now that we are officially in the offseason, our 2 episodes will be during the week. So right now we're planning on doing a Monday and then a Wednesday episode at 9 Eastern time, 8 o'clock Central time. So that's kind of the plan going forward. Also, this is extra content. Doesn't take anything away from what James does in his weekly show. We'll still move on and still put out great content for you guys. But we got to grade the defense, and man, I don't know how else to not give it an F. It was a terrible season, and it's been terrible the last few years. But I was kind of looking at the numbers, and they allowed one 400-yard game before the bye week. That was the 426 against Seattle. That was the 463 against Seattle. They come out of the bye week and allow 435 to the Patriots, 414 to the Bills, 476 to the Atlanta Falcons in the 1-point loss. It wasn't great early in the year. Then they kind of had that middle part just before the bye where they started looking like they were figuring things out. And then after the bye, when you're ranked last or next to last in like every single category after the bye, I don't know how I can't give them an F.
Oh man, I 8-9 season, Jaron. I'm gonna have to go. I mean, now if we're talking the Raiders, that's something different. But right. I mean, I think I'm gonna stay in the C- range, and I think defensively, they didn't really dominate anybody, in my opinion, besides the Saints, where they just wowed you. I thought they had moments where they showed some flashes. I mean, even in the game against Carolina, that last one, I mean, you only give up 14 points, and you held on, made some plays, created some turnovers. And then as I'm looking through it too, I mean, even Arizona held them to 17. But I don't think the defense was good when it mattered against the good teams. I mean, we saw Henderson pop the long run at the end. We saw what Buffalo did to him, scored the most points on him this year. And the Rams at the time was just the Rams, Puka, Nakua, and those guys. I mean, 1,700-yard receiver with all those weapons and a defense at the time that was playing well. My thing is this. I think that This defense definitely underachieved. Okay, Levante led the team in tackles. Dean surprisingly led the team in interceptions. And sometimes the defense played well enough to get the ball back at the end of games, and we saw that. And then you saw turnovers where the offense didn't deliver. So I just think that it was so hard for Tampa Bay to play complementary football. I mean, it's one thing to have an offense that's not playing lights out, but then you try to pick up the slack with the defense, right? That's why, because you complement each other. One plays off the other. I think part of it too with the defense, they started off on short fields with the lack of special teams. I mean, they had some terrible returns. I mean, we saw some disastrous football at times from all three sides, and I think the defense a lot of time takes the brunt of the blame because they're the ones that get judged on the scoreboard from the other team. I just think that when they give up 238 passing, 99 yards rushing, they need to cut those numbers down. If you're only going to average 200 yards passing, then so should the other team. So I don't think they created enough turnovers when it mattered. Also, I think Todd Bowles' defensive scheme got figured out. Some of his blitzes were on tape, and I think he got cute at times. Then they got caught in a situation where man-to-man wasn't working. They were getting the breaks beat off of him in man coverage. So then he goes zone. He gets picked apart. He lets check down Cousins and the boys check him down. And so then I just think they couldn't get to the quarterback either. They just couldn't disrupt the other team's passing game. And so I just think it was a very average defensive season. I don't think it was overly terrible, but I don't think it was great either.
Yeah, I'm going to stick with a D plus for the defense as well. And look, I just talked about all of the reasons why I think Josh Grizzard probably struggled outside of his lack of experience, dealing with all of those injuries. That is legitimate. Todd Bowles didn't deal with that. You lost Cansey in week 2, and pretty much the rest of the season, you had your guys. Jamel Dean missed a little bit here and there, far less than he normally does. Hassan Reddick missed a couple of games. You had Benjamin Morrison, who was in and out of the lineup as a rookie, trying to learn Todd Bowles' scheme. You had games to the end. But you weren't dealing with the ridiculous amount of injuries that the offensive side was. And these are guys that Todd Bowles went out there and said, yeah, give me Hassan Reddick. He's going to be able to help. Draft me Benjamin Morrison and Jacob Parrish. They're going to be able to help me. And I think there's a lot of really young talent on this defense. I think we saw growth from Morrison over the course of the last month when he was getting a lot of playing time. I think Jacob Parrish overall had a pretty solid rookie season. Tyke Smith is an emerging star on the back end. Antoine Winfield Jr., he didn't put up the stats, but he had a Pro Bowl year. Like, he's in the Pro Bowl for a reason. He didn't get the interceptions and the fumbles that he got a couple of years ago, but he's still great. Vita Vea is still Vita Vea. So when you look at all of that and you look at Levante David not being the legend that we know him to be anymore because Father Time is undefeated, you look at Servassier Dennis not being a starting caliber linebacker that was starting. It was back-to-back years now. It was KJ Britt last year. It's Servassier Dennis this year. That all played a factor. And you take a look, they're among the worst of the defenses in the NFL in yards per play, passing yards per game, net yards per attempt, sacks per attempt. They are dead last this year in red zone efficiency. They were 28 in goal to go efficiency. The whole Todd Bowles bend, don't break defensive model blew up in their faces this year. And it shouldn't have when you had the majority of your starters playing each and every week. So while, Marcus, I think you made a great point, the special teams did not do them any favors. I talked about that on my last episode. You were literally giving up the 35-yard line every kickoff because the coverage was so bad. So now you're asking your defense to go out there and prevent the other team from gaining 25 yards. Like, that's all they needed to get into scoring range was 25 yards. That's a lot of pressure to put on that defense. So now you have to play are we a little more conservative so that we don't give up that big play? Are we aggressive to put them behind the sticks? You're trying to play that game. And when you don't have the horses on the edge, when you don't have the horses in the pass rush, you can't get as aggressive as you want to be. And that, that's a reason, not an excuse for why this defense struggled, because Hassan Reddick wasn't what we thought he was going to be. Yaya Diaby is going to be a great Robin. He is not a Batman. And then losing Kalijah Kancey, having to rely on Elijah Roberts as a day 3 pick to go in and play meaningful minutes. It was a hot mess. And some of that is on execution and preparation by the players. You heard Jamel Dean talk about it in the locker room session, that some of these guys were a little too confident in practice and it didn't translate to games. But some of it is on the preparation and the scheme by Todd Bowles and some of the players that he selected.
I think you guys might have talked me into a D. How about I'll move it up from an F to a D? Maybe I was being an emotional fan because the season didn't end well. Maybe that was it. But no, I mean, one of my biggest concerns, I mentioned with the offense, it was just I didn't see an identity. Defense, it was and Marcus, we talked about this almost every single week, was the fundamental stuff that they were messing up quite often, whether it was tackling, whether it was how they were playing different coverage. We mentioned it in the Panthers game. Or what was it, the Falcons game that they were in cover 2 on the 4th and long, and he takes the shallow route, which is technically what you're supposed to do in cover 2, but for this, you got to kind of know the situation. It was just kind of stuff like that all season long. Now, Panthers, it didn't look like that was there. The effort was there. The tackling was pretty good given the poured down rain, and it didn't look like all those little mistakes were there as often this past week. And that was another thing. I thought the effort at times was not great. Whereas, again, against the Panthers it was, against the Saints it was almost like if you punch them in the mouth early, they just couldn't figure out how to recover. But if they were able to stop you and build some confidence, they played pretty good football. But it was almost like they had no confidence most of the year. And some of that's coaching, but most of the year they didn't have confidence. So as soon as you gave them a punch, they didn't know what to do.
Yeah, fundamental football, tackling, blown coverage, miscommunication, missed opportunities. I also think, too, that, like, if you look at that last game, I mean, they were really solid in the run game. I mean, versus a team that runs the ball, which kind of tells me that they never really made anyone one-dimensional in the games that they lost. I mean, they were way too much balance. And it's hard to play defense when a team can throw the ball over your head, or they can convert a first down, or they can run the ball and hit a home run. I just think that they never made anybody one-dimensional. And then I think they really failed when it mattered in situational football. Under no circumstance can you give up a 3rd and 28 in 2 plays in this league, and you got corners jumping routes in front of them and getting 7 routes and sail routes hit behind them. So I think with youth comes some mistakes, and especially in this league at defensive back. And then obviously, McCollum was an Achilles heel in the past game. He struggled a little bit. So, some teams were picking their poison from week to week on who they were going to attack. And then once they decided just to attack Todd Bowles himself, then I think that's where the wheels kind of flew off the handle.
Yeah, now I know we're going to talk about kind of the future of this team on the next squad show. But I feel like if you're going to retain Todd Bowles, which all signs point to that being the case, you have to go all in now. You cannot afford to bargain shop for defensive help. You have to make that move to go get Max Crosby from the Raiders. You have a great relationship with John Spytek and Tom Brady, and he is very angry at that organization. That is a player that you can go out and get, but it's going to cost money. You need to hit free agency, and you need to bring in, a top tier inside linebacker to replace Levante David or Servassier Dennis, either one. Maybe, if you're not giving up a 1st-round pick to the Raiders to get Max Crosby, maybe you're going to get Sonny Styles from Ohio State or somebody like that. But you cannot look for the Shaq Barrett bargain signing like you got when he joined the team, not knowing he was going to set the franchise record in sacks. You can't go out and bargain shop for a Hassan Reddick. You cannot do those things. If you're going to keep Bowles and he's going to be in charge of the defense, you have to give him just as many horses as you gave the offense this offseason. And the Glazers are going to have to keep that checkbook handy and be ready and willing to sign those checks, because otherwise we're going to be having this exact same conversation next year.
Yeah, and we've seen bad defenses, if they have an elite pass rusher like a Max Crosby, it covers up some flaws. It just does. And especially the secondary having flaws. Yeah, I don't think the secondary was that talented, but they were also asked to cover for a long time because they could not get after the passer. I don't care if you have the Legion of Boom back there. It's going to be hard to cover for as long as they were having to do it. So they were put in bad positions. So if you can get a pass rusher like a Max Crosby, obviously that would be big. All right, coming up next, we will give our offensive and defensive MVP for the season. Well, kicking off the year feeling good is the goal, right? And honestly, hydration is the easiest win. When I stay on top of it, my energy, focus, and mood all level up. Let's be real, plain water doesn't always cut it, especially when you're grinding through long days, hitting the gym, or just trying to stay consistent with your healthy goals. That's where Drip Drop comes in. Doctor developed proven fast hydration that helps your body and mind work better, think clear, focus, better energy, elevated mood, even that fresh skin glow. I've been using Drip Drop as part of my daily routine, and it's honestly a game changer, not just for workouts, but every single day. I love several of the flavors. I actually got a full pack, the no sugar pack. Didn't have a flavor in there I didn't like. So I love that it uses a precise ratio of electrolytes and glucose for rapid absorption, delivering 3 times the electrolytes and half the sugar of leading sports drinks. Right now, Drip Drop is offering podcast listeners 20% off your first order. Go to dripdrop.com, use promo code LOCKEDONNFL. That's dripdrop.com, promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Stock up now at dripdrop.com and use promo code LOCKEDONNFL. All right, we're back here for another segment of the Bucs Squad Show, just our season wrap-up show. We're going to go through the offensive and defensive MVP. I'll start us off with the offensive MVP. I think I would go Baker. For a lot of the season, I might have went Emeka just because of how important he was with all the different injuries they had in the wide receiver room. And maybe someone still goes there. But with there being so many injuries, it was hard to figure out anyone other than Baker because of, like I said, the injury. So I'm going to go with Baker. I know his play wasn't great in the second half of the season. First half, it was really good. But there's just not a ton of options out there.
No, there's not. But I'm going to go with Emeka, and I'll tell you why. He played in every game. I think he carried the load while everyone was out. And when he was their number one, they actually played better football. I mean, you can just watch the games and you can see. Now, also, I'm going to say this, 63 catches, 938 yards, didn't get quite, close to that 1,000, close enough to eclipse it. 6 touchdowns, 15 yards per reception. Understand this, though. He's a rookie. He's a rookie that got drafted and walked into the best wide receiver room on paper in the National Football League. So with all the injuries, they're all there. Mike, Jay, Chris, all of them. I understand that. This young man who came fresh out of college and wasn't expected to have to carry the load, he did that. And he even did it, in his first game. I mean, he averaged 17 yards a catch, 2 touchdowns. And then when you just look at his numbers, when he had 4 for 100 yards against a pretty good Philadelphia team. Next week, Seattle cooked them for 163 and a touchdown. It's interesting. He didn't score a touchdown. And I know he had his drops. He played through some injuries. But when he was not the number one receiver, he didn't score another touchdown after whatever. I mean, we can go back and look at it, but I'm saying his numbers dropped significantly. So he didn't score a touchdown in the last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 games. That tells me coming out of the break, he was a forgotten man. I think his confidence was affected. And then when they really didn't have a solid running game, he was the offense. So before Baker's shoulder and everything went down, I'm going to tell you what happened. I think teams started the game plan to take number 2 out of the mix and make the injured guys beat them with an OC that had too many mouths to feed. And when you're in that type of situation with a banged up offensive line, I mean, this young man, I would say for the first 8 games, he carried the load and was one of the best wide receivers in the league. And I think once he became a number 2, 3, 4 option for them, the offense looked different.
My bad. I was muted. My MVP is also Emeka Egbuka. And look, I realized that there was kind of that lull. And Marcus, you're talking about how his role changed. You had all these guys coming back. He wasn't getting the opportunities. It's 100% correct. But you also take a look at what this young man had to do for this team. And he was brought in with a certain role in mind. He wasn't brought in strictly because Chris Godwin was going to miss time. He was brought in to kind of be the future. And when he was drafted, obviously, we thought Jalen McMillan was going to be playing. So he had a certain role that he was supposed to play for this team. And all of a sudden, as a rookie, he is thrust into a position where he's having to play an entirely different role on this team, and he's excelling. And this is why I've talked about how Emeka Egbuka is the future wide receiver one for this team, because he is that talented. He is that good. And I know he had a problem with drops this season. I think it was kind of a mental issue, and he was trying to press a little too much. It might have been because he was so overwhelmed with all the new responsibilities that he had to take on as a young player. But he also had by far the most uncatchable targets this season. If just 20% of those uncatchable targets were catchable, we're talking about him probably being about a 1,200-yard receiver and closing in on double-digit touchdowns. He would have ended up being the rookie of the year, which is now probably going to go to Teteroa McMillan. So, the catch rate is a little deceiving when you take a look at his numbers because of such a high uncatchable target rate. I was just so impressed with his poise, his leadership, his intelligence in having to deal with, all of these changes all throughout the season. He's a special player, and he's going to be a special player for this team for a really, really long time. I just hope that the Bucs are able to find an offense coordinator that can use all of these pieces instead of ignoring your best offensive player of the season for the final month and a half of a year.
Yeah, I think if you don't go Baker, Emeka, just because of what you guys mentioned, he was carrying a receiving room that before the season you thought was the strength of maybe the whole team, not just the offense. And he had to carry that unit because of all the injuries. And as Marcus mentioned, he comes out of the bye, and I think it was maybe me and James going into that bye week or coming out of it where our bold prediction was about Emeka possibly breaking the rookie yards record for the Bucs. And he comes out for what gets like 13 targets and 6 catches, 115 yards against the Patriots. And it looks like he's on target for that. And then I think he had 1 game over 50 yards or 2 games over 50 yards the rest of the season. So I think teams started figuring that out. Okay, let's go to the defensive MVP. This one was tougher, although I think it's Tyke Smith. He had 100 tackles this year, which was 3rd on the team. His 13 pass deflections led the team. He also had 2 fumble recoveries. He had an interception. I think it's Tyke Smith. I really do.
Go ahead, James.
Yeah, I was actually looking at Tyke Smith myself. Now, he did have a little bit of a drop off towards the end of the season. You guys can remember him being pulled for Christian Izien in that game against the Miami Dolphins, which was by far his worst game of the year. But you take a look at some of the good things that this defense did throughout the year, and a lot of it was because of the way that Tyke Smith was playing. He was better in coverage this year than he was last year, and last year he was a slot corner. Of course, it's a little bit of a different set of responsibilities. It's a different position, but he did improve kind of across the board in his defensive playmaking, in his takeaways. He really started to emerge. And I'm really optimistic that, Tyke and Antoine back there is going to be one of the better safety duos for the next couple of years in the NFL. Arguably, you could make a case that they will end up being the best at some point over the next couple of years. But I just think that the growth that we saw from him was absolutely fantastic. And again, he was one of the steadies. He was one of the consistent guys on the defense. Not a lot of the players on the defense were consistent this year. Even with as hot as Jamel Dean started off, he was still, inconsistent down the stretch. Antoine was consistent. Vita, you could say that he was consistent. Other than that, everybody else was kind of like a roller coaster. So yeah, I'll give the nod to Tyke and agree with you, Jaron.
I like Tyke too. I really almost don't want to pick anyone. I mean, I could go Levante. I mean, I could pick Levante just because he led the team in tackles and he played, relatively, decent for an older guy, But for me, I think Jamel Dean had a pretty solid year. Obviously, he had led the team in interceptions. He had 9 pass breakups, and he didn't play in every game, but he was very disruptive. He had 2 forced fumbles. I if they wouldn't have called back the 2 touchdowns against Antoine Winfield, I probably would have went with him.
Yeah.
Versus the Saints, where I thought that was that was the Pro Bowl performance I had been looking for. And sometimes they game planned away from Antoine to kind of make sure he wasn't a havoc player. But I think Dean, man, has just been a guy that I've been watching since he's been there. I think he's getting better, obviously. I think when he wasn't out there, his presence was missed just a little bit. But I think collectively, their secondary has a chance to definitely be dynamic with Tyke and Parrish and those guys. I just think they have to be more confident in the scheme and they have to believe in each other. A secondary like that needs a lockdown corner. I don't know if Dean can be that, but they need a lockdown corner. They need an enforcer. They need a complement, a guy that when you got that lockdown, he can pick up the slack when guys are picking on the other guy. And you need a field general, a guy that can get everybody lined up and make sure that you don't blow those checks in cover 2, or you're playing inside leverage when you're supposed to, when it's 0 coverage and you don't have help. So Tyke, I think, was a great pick. I would have went Levante too, but then I'm going to go ahead and go with Dean.
Yeah, well, and real quick, Jaron, before you jump in, I feel like if this is the last that we've seen from Levante David, it is the single most fitting thing that he ends up tied with Derek Brooks atop the franchise all-time tackle leaders. I know a lot of fans were rooting for him to break that record, and it would have been incredible. But to have those 2 guys who are almost mirror images of one another in their personality, their leadership styles, their approach to the game, how beloved they are in the community, to have them tied atop of that list, I think is absolutely incredible, and you could not have scripted it any better.
How long do you think it takes before he's in the Ring of Honor?
Post-retirement? I'll say 2 years. I think Gene Deckerhoff gets in this year, and then Levante David gets in the next year.
Yeah, and well-deserved, too. I mean, he's had a heck of a career. I do want to ask you, Marcus, real quick. I know we only have like 2 minutes left, but do you feel, because I felt this at times. Now, I said the Panthers game, this last game was kind of different, but I felt this at times that the defense, they almost need an attitude change up. Like they didn't play that nasty defense like we have seen them play. Did you see that? I think part of it was probably the confidence wasn't there, and that's why. And when you're confident, you're more open to talking trash and stuff. When you're not as confident, maybe you don't as much. Do you see that as well?
Yeah, I see that. And I think partly it was because nobody truly dominated. Like they were getting sacks by committee. Everybody was kind of playing their role and doing their part, but they just didn't have that one guy that they could feed off of. And a lot of times that's either going to be a defensive end, a very dominant defensive end, or a middle linebacker. Let's just throw Ray Lewis's name out there. Like those Ravens defenses that he played on, there were some great players out there, but they fed off of his energy. I mean, that defense went where he went. And then you'll see a guy like Ed Reed spin off and make his plays and do his things. And I think those Dickie LeBeau defenses were kind of built like that too, where they had 1 or 2 guys that everybody rallied behind, whether it was James Harrison's defensive touchdown in the Super Bowl or whether it was Troy flying over the pile playing his own defense. I mean, the Bucs were just kind of out there. And then they looked like a defense that didn't trust each other sometimes. But when they were in the top 10 in sacks in the first part of the season, everybody was getting a piece of it. I mean, everybody was kind of doing their thing. And I wouldn't have gave Vita Vea a vote for defensive MVP, but I think his presence was felt too. I mean, he had a few sacks in there too, and he's really a run stopper. So I just think when you don't have that one dude that everybody can just look to and feed off of his energy, then I think it's like a defense having teenagers with no parents.
Yeah, that's a good one. I did see the comment, and I saw, James, you responded, but someone did mention Brady is due for a Ring of Honor. I did like your response, though. He can get that spot once he trades Crosby to the Bucs. But that is a good point. Maybe he gets it before Levante, but I don't know. Maybe they go Levante first. But
I feel like they need to go. Tom Brady will get in there, but I feel like they need to go Levante first, given everything that he's done for this organization, how long he has been with the organization. This is a guy that could have left a lot of times and gotten big money to play on other teams that were already contenders. So, you take a look at kind of the way he and Mike Evans' careers paralleled one another. He is a Buccaneer. He's a lifer. Tom Brady was a hired assassin. Levante David's a lifer. He needs to get in first.
I was going to say that as well, because Brady, even though he won the Super Bowl, everyone's going to remember him for his Patriots years, whereas Levante is a Buck. So, yeah, I agree with that. All right, coming up next, we're going to go around the NFL, look at some of the games from this weekend. Obviously, the Saints-Falcons game is one that we can talk about. Didn't go our way, but that Ravens-Steelers game might have been an all-timer. We'll talk about that coming up next. NFL season is in full swing, and there's nothing like being at the game. The crowd noise, the energy, and cheering alongside other fans. Watching at home is great, but being in the stadium hits different. The frustration part has always been getting tickets, waiting in queues, dealing with logins, and watching prices change right at checkout. That's why the Game Time app gives the advantage back to fans. It's the hack for unlocking amazing NFL tickets and experiences in just a few taps. I pulled up the Game Time app to check out upcoming NFL games. There's several of them that are really good. Mentioned one would be the Bucs and the Panthers that just took place. There's also several other ones, and there's playoff games coming up as well. The app is incredibly intuitive. Browsing, comparing, and buying tickets took just minutes. One of my favorite features is being able to see the view from my seat before buying, so there are no surprises. I've mentioned that many times. Love that feature. I want to see where I'm going to sit, and being able to have that feature on there makes it so much easier. It makes you want to buy tickets from them. So take the guesswork out of buying NFL tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL. That's LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today and get back to being there live. All right, Bucs Squad, we're back for one final segment. We're going to get into the around the NFL games, but I just saw this comment. Did y'all see the comments from Yaya Diaby from today by chance? I just saw this.
I did, but now I can't remember. I saw a lot of comments from a lot of players today.
Okay, so he was asked about the defense, and he said, we had more walkthroughs this year than any other. I'm not going to lie. I'm a straightforward guy. That's one of the things I do want to talk to Coach Bowles about, especially with me possibly being a captain next year. Just letting him know that has to change. We need to prepare the right way. We have to prepare to win. I know injuries are a big thing in this league, but being ready for a game is just as important as anything else. What's kind of your takeaway from that?
Well, man, that's one man talking, and I think it's almost like, when you're a teacher, you have to decide when you have a classroom, everybody learns differently. Some people they learn kinetically or audibly, or they have to get up and move around. So I know that walkthroughs are some good teaching time, but some people learn better in the classroom where it's on the board, and some people learn better actually going through it full speed, making mistakes and getting coached up off of film. So, I mean, I do think he has a point, though. But in the NFL, you have so much time. Like let me give you an example of something just really quickly. When I was a rookie with the Oakland Raiders, 7 o'clock was special teams, 8 o'clock was full team meeting, and then you went into 8:30 was full defense, okay? And then you went probably 9:30 was position meeting. So by 11 o'clock, it's a walkthrough. And then there's lunch, and then you go back and you watch film and you go over your install, and then you go out there and practice at 3, 4 o'clock until 6 o'clock, watch the film, you're out at 7. So there's plenty of time to get what you need done. So I don't know, because I wasn't there to see it for myself, and different players learn different ways, and walkthroughs are pretty important. Like, you don't see them a lot in high school. You don't have the luxury. In college, you may get a walkthrough on a Thursday or Friday, but in the NFL, you do have a lot more time because it's work. It's your job. There's nothing else to do but football. And so walkthroughs they aren't going anywhere, because a lot of these guys they learn at a slower pace. And some guys that are veterans that know the system, they don't like walkthroughs because they know what's going on. But you have to be able to service everybody and get on the same page.
Yeah, I don't think Yaya's calling for the end of walkthroughs, but there was a pretty excessive amount. And I saw my guy David in the chat. He mentioned it. I was going to bring it up. Jamel Dean kind of, Yaya, as you said in the quote, Jaron, he said, "I'm a straightforward guy." Jamel tiptoed around it, but definitely alluded to thinking that or saying that the walkthroughs were a little too much this year, that, because I think it was Pewter Report, and it would take me a minute to bring it up, but he went through Scott Reynolds. He went through and highlighted every single walkthrough that they had. So, I mean, it was multiple walkthroughs for, ahead of some of these games that they lost. Like, you had 2 walkthroughs ahead of that Falcons Thursday night game. So you only had one real day of practice going into that Thursday night. Would an extra day of real practice have made a huge difference? I don't know. But it is something that was a little different compared to years past for this team. And, causation and correlation, you can make that debate. This was the one time that they didn't make the playoffs compared to the last couple of years. So it's interesting to say the least, and all this will get sorted out. We all believe that Todd Bowles is likely going to stay now, based on all the reports and what we're hearing. He is still set to meet with the Glazers later this week.
I'll give you one more deal about the walkthroughs before we move on. Is this? I think it only works against you when you're installing new stuff that you don't get a chance to rep. And I think Todd Bowles, I think he was installing week to week new defensive blitzes that those guys hadn't been running, so they had to spend time on it, and they might have only ran that blitz once or twice. I think that's what Yaya's saying, is that there was a whole lot of things that were thrown at the wall that didn't stick, that they spent too much time on, instead of probably just repping things that they're really get good at what you're good at. But I think Bowles found himself getting a little too cute. And when you start installing new blitzes, that's when you see more walkthroughs. I think that's where it comes from.
And it's also probably one of those things that if they're winning and in the playoff, you probably don't even hear about it.
Exactly.
And don't walkthroughs are happening. So, all right, so let's go around the NFL right now. We'll talk about some games that stood out to each of us, but I thought Baltimore and Pittsburgh was one of the games of the year, especially that last 4 or 5 minutes that felt like 30 minutes. They were trading blows. Aaron Rodgers looked like vintage Aaron Rodgers. Lamar Jackson looked like vintage Lamar Jackson. It looked like that incredible 4th down play to Likely was going to be the game winner. He set up a 44-yard field goal for the rookie, but he misses it far right, and the Steelers go to the postseason instead of the Ravens. It was one of those weird games because it almost felt like an end of an era game, because I don't know if y'all saw after the game, right when the game ended, Harbaugh was crying. And it might have been one of those things that he's crying because it's just an emotional game, but it also might have been one of those things that he might have known beforehand that it's his last year there. I don't know, because they were asking him about it. They were asking Lamar about it. And so it was just weird. I thought it was a weird thing.
I thought that was a very interesting game. It looked like Baltimore was going to run away with that one starting off. And then, stranger things starts happening. And then you had the big interception by Watt. And then, when it comes down, I just feel sorry for field goal kickers because they're just asked to do so much and so little with about 6 plays per game. But for me, it was a hard weekend to watch because I didn't really realize how many starters on some of these teams were going to be out. So I couldn't imagine being a betting man and picking, the Browns to go into Cincinnati and win, or like the Packers, lost 4 in a row just to lay down like that against the Vikings. And then, Jacksonville just looks like, I don't know, man. They may come up out of the AFC, but it was hard to watch, man, just because, you just didn't know who was going to be out there, who was going to play. But I'll tell you one thing I did keep an eye on was old Dan Campbell. He made sure that he was going to give it to the Bears one time before his season ended, and that handshake was very quick too. So that's going to be interesting to see how that rivalry plays out. But it was an interesting weekend. Obviously, watching Raheem Morris get fired after he found a way to turn that season around and salvage it to be tied for first place in a three-way tie, and then you lose your job. It's just it's a tough business. But I think even the Chargers kind of laid down a little bit, but they didn't play everybody. So I will find out if that works for or against the teams that do that. Never been a big fan of it in that last game going into the playoffs. And you hear them talk about that in college football playoff, rust versus rest. So we'll see, but I think we got some pretty good matchups coming. I don't think there's really a bad game. I mean, in these first round of the playoffs, this wild card round. So going around the NFL, man, I think is wide open. The best teams are going to be on display. And Pittsburgh and that Ravens game was a great game, but I see Pittsburgh getting bounced possibly. So, a 4-5 game, but I would have much rather see Lamar Jackson in the playoffs. I just like watching him. I know, he's got there a couple of times in that last game and couldn't get over the hump, but it's something about watching Aaron Rodgers, man, just stumble and fumble around at this point of his career. It's just, I don't think the Steelers got a shot.
Real quick before you go, James, I thought that Lions, Ben Johnson, Dan Campbell handshake, that's the second time. It's been quick and go. I don't remember there ever being bad blood being reported until that first handshake happened. That's weird. I don't know what happened there. Something happened.
I mean, you go to a division rival. I mean, I guess Bowles and Canales are pretty kind to one another, but that's a little bit of a different situation and two very different personalities compared to Dan Campbell and Ben Johnson. We'll see if Bowles sticks around and they play Jacksonville in the preseason. We'll see how the handshake goes with Liam Cohen. But yeah, Marcus, I'm with you. I didn't really get to watch a lot of football. I was, my son had hockey on Sunday. We were driving for hours on end on the way home. We were listening to a lot of football. Did get to see Myles Garrett get the sack record, which I thought was incredible. Also, all due respect to Michael Strahan, dude, shut up. Like you're complaining about how it took Garrett 17 games when it only took you 16. Bro, you broke the record from a guy that said it in 14 games, but that was okay. Like, anyway, I digress.
Great point.
Not just that, Brett Favre fell down for him.
Yeah.
Favre definitely took a dive for him, and Myles Garrett had like almost 200 fewer snaps this season than Strahan did back in 2001. So
and Strahan was on a better team.
Oh yeah. Myles. Also, to be fair, Myles Garrett probably should have set the record about 3 weeks ago. But that Baltimore-Pittsburgh game, I didn't see the finish until I woke up on Monday morning, and that actually hurt the Bucs because of Baltimore losing. The Bucs dropped from 14th to 15th in the draft. So that was a little frustrating. I had to yell at my Steelers-loving buddy. I was like, why couldn't you just let us have nice things? As far as the matchups, and we'll probably dive more into them on Wednesday's episode. Look, Josh Allen, this is your chance. For the love of all things holy, go out there and win a Super Bowl. You don't have to deal with Lamar. You don't have to deal with Patrick Mahomes. You go take the Super Bowl for Buffalo, please. We all want to see it. We want to see the Bills win a Super Bowl. And Marcus, I will also echo your sentiment. Steelers are going to get worked. Aaron Rodgers is not doing anything against that Houston defense because that defense is, especially after the letdown performance they had against Riley Leonard and the Indianapolis Colts. No, that Texans defense is going to come out firing. Would not surprise me at all if the Steelers get shut out in that game.
Yeah, for sure. It's going to be exciting to see the playoffs and how they shake out. But yeah, it was a crazy game. Did hurt the Ravens and the Steelers. Did hurt the Bucs. So not fun. But all right, that's going to do it for us. Again, this is our squad show. We do it twice a week. We will now be doing it on Monday and Wednesdays, 9 o'clock Eastern time, PM, and then 8 o'clock Central time. Those 2 days. If something changes, we might have to move some things around. But overall, that's something that we're going to be doing moving forward. So on Wednesday, we're going to look forward. We're going to talk about bowls. We're going to talk about free agency, draft, all that stuff. We're going to talk about that more on Wednesday. So stay tuned for that. And until next time, fire the cannons.